for the purposes of the nystagmus guideline, we've started with a fixation guideline. We're following the ISCET model. Shall I share where we were at in terms of so for those, I don't know if people are aware of what the model oh no, that's not it. Okay, can we see that?
Yes.
Is that the Excel sheet?
The Word document.
Yeah, that's the minutes of the meeting.
Oh, is it? Okay, hold on. Is that the Excel sheet now?
We still don't see it.
Nothing at the moment. Just for the benefit of the video, I appreciate the video just started while Rebecca was talking there, but we've basically just introduced the agenda items and moved straight to item 2 for now, so we will pick up from there.
Okay, so here we go. So we took the ISCET model and used their kind of subheadings in order to start to bring together the standards. We all had an input in this, and where we got to at the last meeting was really as much as anything with regards to the clinical protocol. We've all kind of gone off in pairs now just to try and find whether there's any evidence for any of the points that we've suggested in terms of the way that the clinical protocol will work for this fixation protocol. And then I think the idea is that once we've got a fixation protocol, well then if you within that fixation protocol you say yes, there may be nystagmus, there would then be another protocol or different standard for guidelines for measuring the nystagmus. So at the moment, that's where we're up to. We're at the point whereby we're just trying to follow the ISCET model as best as we can, because we thought that model was safe and it worked previously. So now we're just looking for the evidence to go with the clinical protocol guidelines in terms of performing the eye movements. And I think we're due to meet again in June. Is that right, Helena?
Yeah, in June. And we'll summarise whatever evidence everyone got. If there's not enough evidence, we'll have to do consensus and perhaps surveys to finalise those points.
Yeah, but I think it's worked quite well using the ISCET model. It's given us some structure. I think that's where because we're sort of going round in circles, I think, a little bit to begin with. So I think having that ISCET model to use has given us the structure that we need to have succinct information rather than going off on random tangents.
Matt has his hand up.
Yeah, can I ask, are there any, from your perspective as the chairs, anything that you'd like to feed forwards for future standards committees? Because the reason that we did this fixation/nystagmus thing on its own at the beginning was to learn from it and learn how we can improve how the process will work for the future committees.
So I would say, as I just said, we were kind of going around in circles a little bit, and I think that having a structure like the ISCET model has really helped us to kind of utilize the meetings effectively, and come away with something substantial at the end of each meeting to be then working on going forwards.
Clear action points, basically.
Yeah. I think before we decided, before we had some structure, I think it was the first couple of meetings were probably not useless, but do you know what I mean? There was
until we said
everybody's busy, aren't they? Everybody's busy. To fit everything in an hour, I think that's what you need. I think you need that structure.
I'm wondering, actually, it might be helpful. One thing which I prepared for the next subcommittee meeting was we were going to talk about how this would fit into the wider set of standards. I have made a very rough first draft of how that might look, and I'm wondering if I can share.
That would be useful. I think if other committees are having to work on elements of eye movements, I think everyone being familiar with the ISCET structure in advance and having their contributions ready for each bit of that hopefully we'll have the fixation one kind of done. So then there'll be an example using fixation, how this has worked out. So then you'll have a lot of the preparatory work done in advance at the beginning. And then you can be able to structure action points or areas where you're missing information or need more evidence. And then I anticipate there will be surveys and things to reach consensus on. There are going to be some things where we will not have evidence available for what we do.
I'm going to have to just quit and reopen in order to be able to share anything.
I'm not sure how to raise my hand in the interface. It's not coming up right now, but just to let you know that myself and Larry have written the literature review, which covers previous standards for nystagmus, and it's kind of ready for comment. If anyone wanted to dip in there, it's up on Overleaf. And I've created a table of previous relevant guidelines, taking in the Barani Society and things like that. Some of them are from microsaccades or saccades, but we took what was relevant for nystagmus detection. So maybe it would be good to coordinate across those tasks.
Yeah, that's good for sure. And how do people get access to the Overleaf if they want to have a look?
Well, I can either share the PDF or I can share the Overleaf for people who are happy to use LaTeX.
Could you put it on the forum?
The PDF?
Well, the link or the PDF itself, you can embed things, yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure about my access to the forum or if I'm on the emailing list for the nystagmus subcommittee. Because I got this meeting invite from Larry, I actually wasn't sure that it was happening. So I'm not, maybe that's something that we can.
I'll send you the link to join the mailing list. You might just not be on the ISCET mailing list, so I'll sort that out.
Okay.
Yep.
But if you're interested to see, I can also share screen if it's appropriate.
I think Matt was going to share something, and then you can.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, it's is it going to allow me? Yes, it is going to allow me. Okay. It was just a very brief outline of, and again, this is extremely early, rough idea, but thinking about how the standards might link together. So at the moment, the nystag. Can you see this? I hope you can make it bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah, so at the moment there's committee working on nystagmus and fixation, and we've kind of got this hybrid approach of working on individual eye movement types and then how those might feed up into disease detection or diagnosis. And by starting with fixation, clearly everything comes from fixation, right? If you're doing pursuit, it's going to be probably a similar kind of paradigm that with a moving target, and saccade is a similar target that jumps around. So the idea is these would be kind of layered things. The exact content of these is entirely just, a very draft beginning thing. But we'll also have to think about these things in the bottom left here as well. So it's all very well having a fixation protocol, but we also need to think about how we would deal with the actual analysis of the data in terms of pre-processing. There's going to be a lot of steps in eye tracking data analysis, which will be common across all the disorders, for example, with how you deblink data and all that sort of stuff. And then one of the things that ISCET's talked about is having an open data format that is compatible across eye tracking types and so on. So I just wanted to share that briefly as an initial idea. It's nothing set in stone here, but hopefully it gives an idea of where we're kind of pointing towards at the moment. That's all.
Yeah, makes sense.
Cool.
Hopefully we get fixation done, and then that will turn green.
Yeah.
Great. Do you want to share, Fiona, from your side?
Sure. Yeah. It's this one. Do you see a PDF there?
Yes, it's clear.
Okay. So this is the kind of structure that we've taken in this. I took a run at it, and then Larry has commented and added other content, including some figures and so on. So we tried to go through the basic requirements for reliable detection across slow and fast components, and look at the clinical thresholds from the Barani Society standards and how they relate.
Fiona,
So,
could you please zoom in a bit?
oh, better?
Yeah, great.
Okay. So when I was putting this together, I tried to start with the clinical questions, just as a framing, to say, if someone comes in, what are the questions that a clinician wants to answer? And so here and kind of took that the whole way through the literature review to try and point out at each stage why each cited reference is relevant. So we took from Larry these basic questions that the clinician might have, and then expanded them into further analysis where warranted, looking at things that are more reliant on eye trackers in many cases. And just went through each of these pretty systematically in the literature, added in some figures to show what this looks like. This is 500 hertz and downsampled data, just showing the clipping effect on a nystagmus event. And then into the signal processing foundations and filters, into the technical side of it a little bit. And the table that I talked about, sorry for scrolling fast here, but I want to get down to this table. This is just a placeholder figure from Lee and Z, just to reference the diagnosis of oscillopsia. And then this table, one second, just rotate, is going through the existing literature, and minimum sample made and additional requirements that this literature cites for the various measures of interest in nystagmus, to try and give a kind of summary or something that can be quickly referenced. And one thing that we haven't finished yet is, I think it would be nice to have something that's very quick to look at for clinicians, like a summary reference included at the end, which we don't have yet. And it would be good to work with a clinician on that. At the moment, I've very much framed it that, the decision is pragmatic, and that while some of these cited papers are, limitations, that there's also the need to exercise clinical judgment for qualitative measures. So try to differentiate qualitative versus quantitative measures, and judgments that would be made by the clinician based on looking at the data versus any kind of automated process that might go on in a clinical system. So that's kind of where we're at, and I've compiled the relevant references, but there may very, very well be more that people could add. I did a systematic review or a systematic search based on data quality and other constraints for the robust measurement of saccadic and slower components. So that's kind of where it's at, but it's pretty substantial for an introduction. It probably needs to be shortened rather than lengthened, but given that it was not yet very narrowed down what we want to cover, I've given quite a broad net, and it's easier to talk about something on a page than not yet on a page. So that was the intention.
That looks like an amazing piece of work that you've done. I'd love to be able to see it in detail at some point.
I'm
Yeah.
happy to share the overleaf. I know you're okay with the overleaf, Matt, right?
Yeah.
So I'm happy to share that with you. It would be good to have a bit more input. Like I said, I just took a run at it, because I think it's easier to have something on a page than not. But given that there's a lot more relevant standards and guidelines out there that don't specifically mention nystagmus, but are very relevant because they cover, for example, microsaccades are very relevant for the fast component and so on. I've included quite a bit that's not explicitly nystagmus, and tried to, intelligently discuss why or what the argument for their inclusion or further consideration in looking at nystagmus guidelines.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah.
Fantastic piece of work. Wasn't did this come out of when we asked you about what you knew about minimum technology requirements?
Well, I've done quite a bit of work on data quality requirements in general before, and I've done some standardization work, but it was based on like safety standards for the use of infrared light and photobiological effects. So it's not really relevant, but it's except that the structure of standardization is pretty uniform across the CIE, the ISO, all these different boards. So how to set up for consensus and all, communication and that kind of thing is something that I have some experience with, because I chaired a CIE ISO standard. So yeah, it's very much coming from the sort of ground truth signal processing arguments for minimum sample rate, minimum spatial and temporal precision, and so on. But trying to also be very mindful that clinical decision making also, requires that there's some informed consideration beyond what we can say numerically. So I think Larry liked my last sentence, which is this one: the specifications should be understood as the minimum required to support the full range of quantitative nystagmus measurements, but where a clinical purpose is demonstrably qualitative, the application of these thresholds requires the exercise of clinical judgment. And I just kind of wanted to end it with that, just to make it crystal clear, pending all of your feedback. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's great work.
Is that something we could circulate ahead of the next nystagmus subcommittee meeting, perhaps?
Yeah.
Alongside everything else everyone has to do, but
yeah, I think it would be good to have just maybe one or two people to come in and have a look. Because I'm not sure how far off topic I go, and I don't want to include a lot of stuff to read that maybe isn't relevant or could be just removed. So I think it would be great, Matt and whoever else was interested to come in and take a look first before releasing it, just from the point of view that there may be stuff in here. It's quite long. And so to sort of minimize how much we're asking people to read, it could be good to have a little bit of feedback in a smaller group first. But it's nearly there. I think it's ready definitely for just a couple of you who have a clearer idea on what you want to cover, especially since some of the work on, the scope of what we're trying to do has changed the scope a little bit, it sounds like, from Rebecca. So it would be good just to match the scope up first before distributing it widely, I think.
It would be good to get some additional expertise on vestibular nystagmus, because I can speak to the infantile forms, as can Larry, and maybe Larry has done more work on vestibular himself. But if that, I'm not sure exactly how much he has done, but if he has, then that's fine. But if not, maybe it's worth getting somebody else with vestibular expertise as well.
Right. And I've included papers that refer to VHIT and so on the vestibular side here too, because some of the, you know, some of the metrics they come up with are very much relevant. So yeah, but again, it's very much from the research point of view and being mindful of the clinical practice, but it would be good to have a little bit of collaboration. Yeah. And also to know, like, for example, I included this, just a placeholder image that I literally took with my phone from Lee and Z's book, just because the discussion really gets into when are we likely to have a visual, you know, deficit due to nystagmus. And it's hard for me to know, am I going a little bit outside the scope with that sort of thing? Because
there's a lot of expertise within the subcommittee itself. You know, that's many of the people who joined that were nystagmus experts. I think primarily, again, it's the infantile nystagmus form, but you will certainly find that. And with regards to, you know, detecting whether there's visual issues, I think the people who are performing the electrodiagnostic testing, I know at least there's Sian here, there's Fatima Shortcut as well. I think she's on the committee. So there's people we can talk to about that as well.
Right. Yeah, so it's really about scope matching for me. So I went for a very wide net because I'm not 100% concrete on the scope. But I think it would be easy enough to adapt, depending on what way you want to do it. Actually, if you're going more for fixation in general, that fits even better potentially, because I have been quite broad. And because there isn't necessarily specific nystagmus guidelines already, but there are many other guidelines that are relevant.
Yeah, go on.
That's it.
Okay, so just to make it crystal clear, is that like for the nystagmus subcommittee to have a look on this and comment, or this is also for like that we will put it on the forum and for the expertise from the general committee that could also have an opinion on it?
I think it needs to start with the smaller committee first before it goes out to 100 plus people, because that gets messy.
Yeah,
exactly.
And I did write it for the nystagmus goals.
Okay.
So,
yeah, great.
And
so,
we could look at this in the context of everything else that everyone has been sent off to do as well, to see if we can kind of make it all work together, or whether we're looking at separate publications looking at this. So
I mean,
part one, it's an amazing piece of work.
I mean, it's really just a literature review. So
yeah, but it's done exactly what, well, probably beyond what I thought you'd be doing.
yeah. So
researcher.
Yeah. I was hoping for a table, you know, and I would have been happy to see a table of what people were using, and you've given us a full-on justification for everything that you've put in. So well done.
I mean, that's good to hear. I mean, you haven't read it yet, so don't count your chickens.
This is speed reading the bits I could see.
Right. Well, I mean, for me, when I'm not entirely, when the scope was quite broad, I just, this is how I approach it. I try and have a good general approach, and then we can remove what ends up not being relevant. I'm good at removing large chunks of text where needed. So it was an interesting search anyway.
It might be needed for other committees, so.
Right. Yeah.
Hey, great. So then the nystagmus subcommittee, do you want to share anything else before jumping into maybe the survey subcommittee? So do you want to share any final stuff?
No, I think we'll have an update after our next meeting in June, when we see the outcome of everyone else's evidence search.
We'll be so eager for Yeah, for the updates. Amazing work out there. For the survey subcommittee, actually, Gemma couldn't join us today, but I see some of our members here. So Matt and Siwan and Fiona, and but we had some already previous points to discuss. So I can maybe, do you want to share them, Matt? Do you want to discuss the updates
So from the
survey?
subcommittee.
Yep.
So yeah, I wonder. So we don't have a formal update from that then. So in that case, I'll make it up on the spot. We're at the point now of putting together the discussion. Fiona's done some great work putting together the tables, summarizing and the figures summarizing the results we've got from the survey. So there's been a long process of coding responses, trying to sort of coerce them into a way that we can actually then start to put them numerically on the page. So I think we've got the point now where those results are pretty much all agreed upon. And we're now writing the discussion with the hopes of that being drafted within 2 weeks from now, so that we can then circulate a final version, or not a final, but a complete draft that everyone can comment upon. So I'm trying to think of the headline figures. In fact, if I just, it's not on my head right now. Actually, no, I can bring it up.
Do you want me to share the figures?
Well, I kind of one of the things actually I did today was to summarize the headlines from that to start the discussion section. So I pulled that up. So the main things we had, things that kind of jumped out. Obviously, everybody who responded to this had an interest in eye tracking. That was kind of implicit. So it's perhaps not surprising. There's a lot that were using eye tracking, but I was surprised that we've had 4 neurologists that responded, and they said that they use eye tracking daily. All 4 of those said that. We had 2 audiologists respond. They said they both said again they use it daily. 7 ophthalmologists, of which 6 are using eye tracking daily. And just over half the orthoptists, we had 9 of those that respond, saying they're using eye tracking daily as well. So there's quite a lot of that. Some of the questions were around the barriers to clinical eye tracking adoption and why people perceive that not being more widely adopted. And the top 3 responses on that were that eye trackers are predominantly believed to be research tools. So that was ranked as the top reason. Many people were just saying they simply don't have access to eye tracking. And then the third response by rank was that many people feel that, to their knowledge, there's not currently a suitable eye tracker out there that would perform the assessments they need to do. The majority of respondents were not aware of existing guidelines for clinical eye tracking. That's of those that actually are using eye tracking, whether performing or interpreting. That was 89% of respondents aren't aware of any guidelines, and 93% of people believed that guidelines should exist. Of those that actually responded, many people didn't answer that question. So there's clearly a need for guidelines, and that kind of supports what we're doing here in a way. And the majority of people that suggested that guidelines should exist are already using them on a daily basis. So what else to say? We had 17 responses from manufacturers. Now, what we don't know is which company they work for. So we may have had a large number from one company, perhaps. But of those, 59% of those respondents said that their device is approved for clinical use. But actually, the majority or the largest number of people using a single type of eye tracker was the iLink, although that could have been any iLink. It could be 1000, it could be in the iLink 2, and so on. So there are lots of people using iLink, which to my knowledge is not approved for clinical use in any form. That was what I pulled out as the kind of headlines. Yeah, Fiona, since you've got this up, is there anything else that I haven't mentioned that you think is worth? And it's nice to see the figures as well, rather than just hearing me talking.
Sorry, I was muted.
Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Not really. I mean, I think that we're almost there in terms of what we want to include in the paper. From these figures, this is the second round I've done of analyzing the data and or plotting. So I think that one thing that's probably important to point out is the overall response rate, because we had quite a few who didn't respond to a lot of the questions. I think at the end I included this as a table. 1 second. So here, yeah. So these are the different questions, and you can see that the response rates are quite variable across the different kinds of questions. But in general, I think we just need to report what people are actually saying in it, and also to report carefully how, Matt and I and others went in and codified the data, because we did recode in many cases due to the questions being repetitive across, people were directed to different parts of the questionnaire depending on their role, whether they were clinical or industrial or other roles. So I don't think, maybe this is an interesting one to look at, the thematic analysis, where we had free text responses to the question of which eye movement types or conditions clinical eye tracking guidelines should cover. And this was a little bit difficult because the data that we got back to that question covered not only eye movement types, but also, different diagnoses and methods and clinical decisions and so on. So it was quite heterogeneous sort of response. So to try and resolve that, I did a thematic analysis of the responses, and they sort of group into these 4 main categories. So that's maybe relevant for the wider group to see what people would like guidelines on. I can't think of anything else.
No, that's great. I think yeah, we obviously learned a lot about how we would streamline this if we were to repeat it in the future. And I think one of the points I wanted to raise later in this meeting was about how we can evidence any changes that ISCET actually brings about in how eye tracking is used. And a repeat of this survey or something that we can at least refer back to the old one from would potentially be one way of doing that. So this, we need to make clear notes on what we've learned and how we would change this, so that we can then structure a follow-up survey maybe in a few years' time.
Yep.
Yeah, but there are that's a lot of work in the analysis, and we're about, as Fiona mentioned, we're about to finalize this and maybe then move into the discussion part of the drafted paper. And but while doing that, we had some questions that we wanted to raise like here in the and take your opinion. For example, we discussed that about the data repository later. So we wanted some suggestions, like some suggested GitHub, or according to your expertise, everyone, like we would like this is raised from the survey committee, but as we said, we all will have this as learning points from the subcommittee works. So that's it.
I've picked up when you dropped out. So just so you know, we've covered now the 2 subcommittees and the communication process, but we haven't dealt with the first item on the agenda, which was the formalization of the requirements for being on subcommittees, nor have we looked at the general membership and ethics framework, the document that you posted on the forum.
Yeah.
So maybe you can pick up one of those.
Yeah, well, okay. Regarding the membership form, we have previously discussed that we need to have a formal membership, and we agreed here before in previous meetings on that. So I'm not sure if you found a draft for the on our panel on the website. Some have had comments on it, but there are currently membership forum templates and also collaborative forums, together with like a code of conduct, the regulations for ISCET, because also that's a interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary area where there are not a lot of clear regulations in this area of eye tracking, and also we get to use AI sometimes with some equipment. So it was kind of putting this all together with our broad clinical and data ethics.
I've just posted the link to that document, by the way, Rasha,
Yeah,
so
that's great. So this document has been open there for comments on the forum, and we should be moving on to this formal membership. Currently, we have voted before here that it's going to be a non-paid one. Later on, we might move into a paid one if we need, because currently our expenses for ISCET, like we get the website grant from Matt's university, but this ends, I guess, next year.
In March.
Yeah.
I'm hoping to put some funds from any time I put a grant application in, I'll try and bring a bit of money from that into ISET if I possibly can.
Exactly. But as we discussed earlier, or actually Matt discussed on behalf of me, like even the like some of the things, like to have a place for the data keeping and the website and other stuff, we would need at a certain time some sort of payment. But now it's all for just the people currently who are have subscribed to our mailing list and showed interest. We would welcome them to move on to the formal membership after agreeing on all the and registering through the membership forms. Yeah, go on.
Can I suggest, could we ask Ruth if you're available at the moment to just let us know how ISEV is funded, if you can share that with us, because obviously you have ongoing costs. You use the system of Wild Apricot, which is a membership management forum, which we don't use because it would cost too much at the moment. And I know that I suppose ISEV has paid memberships. That's the thing. But understanding what members get back in return. I've always been quite keen on not trying to put a paywall up, because this is still a society that's very much in a growth phase, and we want this to succeed, and just putting up a barrier is going to stop people from doing that potentially. So I'm in favor of keeping this free as much as we possibly can, and funding through grants if possible. I guess Ruth's not available at the moment to discuss ISEV, but maybe we can get her thoughts if she returns later.
Yeah. So, but I guess we are ready to move for the membership forums. If you also would like to have a look on what's posted on the panel as just a final also chance for discussion here. Yeah, either now or later.
Rasha, the main point that I raised, I've put them a comment in the document as well, was I was unsure about the rationale for having two separate grades of membership. You said you would have like members and then non-member collaborators.
Well, the point is the collaborators is just like, for example, what we also voted for, that we can have collaboration with other entities. The entity, for example, that we are collaborating with is ISEF in the nystagmus subcommittee. So not all the people who are actually right, I'm not sure, because we don't have like exact statistics yet, but some people are already members of ISEF and they're not entitled, or they don't feel like they are, into the eye tracking per se society. So these are collaborators. Like that was the point of this membership. It could be a separate one, but then I felt it would be easier this way. But of course,
okay, yeah, I think my suggestion was that why not just have a single membership grade and just say if you're going to collaborate, then that you can join as a member if it's free anyway, just for the sake of simplicity. Really.
Probably. But that's a good point. If it's confusing, but my thought is that this is the Word document. But if you have it actually on the website, then it would direct people maybe to this route or the other, according to whether he's a member or he's just like signing in just a collaboration form. For a certain purpose, I mean. Yeah, that's it. But and then what we had actually in the agenda is just like for the standard, like the formalization of the standard subcommittee. That's another topic actually related to that, but I felt that the whole membership thing is the broader.
It would certainly be nice
topic.
to know who our who our members are and what their interests are, as long as it doesn't become too invasive in terms of, too much data collection. But I think it would be beneficial. At the moment, I can say that we've got over 150 members, but only if you count people who subscribe to the email list, which is a very loose definition.
Yeah, exactly. So that's also a quite a good number to share. So we're now 150. Yeah, we'll see. We're aiming that all of us would turn into this formal membership. So yeah, but I think if we don't get comments soon on the post that is already on the forum, I think we're gonna proceed with that, because almost every meeting we have been speaking about having the membership formalized, the
Rasha,
general membership.
I'll just add, when you were away, I covered the point about communication, because of course I think a lot of people don't see the forum because they either don't know it's there or they don't think to check. I mean, I could admit sometimes I'll go a long time without thinking, oh, I should probably see if someone's posted something. You can subscribe to a post if you've added one, but I don't think you should subscribe to receive everything. And the discussion we had just a moment ago, at least, was that the JISC mail system seems to be the best method we have. So I wonder if, I think maybe someone would propose having a link to the JISC mail system on the forum page, and maybe we don't need the forum per se, just to avoid having too many systems of communication. Anyway, just a thought. That might be why people haven't seen it, because maybe it would be worth also posting it on the JISC mail system as well. Then people might see it.
Mm-hmm. So
and put a deadline for feedback.
Mm.
It helps to put a deadline in.
Yeah. So you mean we share again the links, or now, as we have already announced that it's there, they can, because you have the link in the comments.
This is only the meeting of the Europe and Africa branch, so I think it'd be worth putting it on the JISC mail forum, just the mailing list, to make sure that anybody who might have missed the forum post gets a chance as well.
Okay, great.
Just a quick question on it, on the document that Matt shared. Do you think it's there? Just because the reason we developed the safety standard for infrared exposure was because of concerns whether exposure could potentially cause a safety issue, especially when people are exposed for longer durations, really. But it was in the context of the fact that there's a lot of homebrew eye trackers, and it's much cheaper to increase the amount of light you're using for illumination than it is to improve your cameras. And since we do have quite some clinical sites also developing and using their own trackers, that could also maybe be relevant.
My view on that is that might be beyond the remit of ISCET. I mean, if a device is approved for clinical use, presumably it will go through all those kind of tests anyway. I can see how in a research setting, people are more likely to use homemade pieces of kit. And obviously there are currently clinicians using eye trackers off-label, as it were. Were you suggesting that ISCET gets involved in that?
No, just when I look through the list of relevant standards and guidelines.
I see. Yes, fine, absolutely.
And given that there is only really one eye tracker approved for clinical use, and there are quite some clinical sites and hospitals who are developing their own systems, particularly for things like VHIT, just because there are not very many options. So it was just in that context of if you wanted to refer to relevant or in your list where you have all the different guidelines that should be relevant or that you want to comply with in this document. It seems like it's the first time I've seen it, so I'm just looking through, the general data protection, international ethics guidelines, and then, you cite the ISO guideline for medical devices, but there is also the CIE ISO guideline for eye trackers, illumination, and maximum exposure limits and things like that.
I think one of the comments I made on the document actually was that list, it may be a bit unwieldy to include such a list anyway, in particular because there's AI guidelines on there and they're likely to change super quickly. Unless we can be sure we're producing a completely comprehensive, exhaustive list, my suggestion is just simply omit the list entirely because it opens a can of worms. But people can comment on the document as they feel.
Yeah, thank you for raising these points. And yeah, I have been waiting for such comments actually. So thank you. And yeah, it took some exhausting, like it was even a lot to try to pass through and get what's relevant to us in this field. And with this all, we are reaching the same conclusion that we don't find specific regulation for this field, so we had to put in what's relevant. But whether to include or not, like my opinion was to include it, and then we should anyway update it, like as like leave the general concept that we should follow the latest guidelines, and then we would, I think part of what we do is to help in also putting the existing regulations whenever they come out if we can. But of course that this is something, yani, I'm happy to discuss because yeah, it was my thoughts, and I will circulate it, and then maybe we get more comments and put things into action.
Yeah, regulations are going to be quite tricky because we're talking about international guidelines. So we might have different sets of regulations in different countries. So yeah, that is a can of worms to get into. Like even MHRA diverging from the EU. Even that is a can of worms.
Yeah. And that's why, like, some of the wording in the document was cautious to say what exactly we're gonna do. So I think it needs a thorough discussion on that, and it's great to have comments when
I think it
all
is
of
worth
that.
bearing in mind the extent to which people may see ISCET as an authority in the future, and that would mean that we would then be held liable if there were any kind of gaps in what we're producing. So I'm a little bit hesitant to provide guidance unless we're absolutely crystal clear that we're going to be keeping on top of it and have the means to do so. But I think it's a useful list. I'm not criticizing that. I just think keeping it up to date could be tricky, and we may be held liable. Guess it comes down to scope, knowing where our scope ends.
Do we have legal advice, Matt? I guess we're not quite at that level, are we?
Level yet? No, I think the reason why we've been very careful about, that the standards are not about diagnosing; they're about understanding where you deviate from normal, etc., etc. But we have to keep a close eye on that as we go through.
I mean, it could be useful to have reference to things that we explicitly don't cover, and then refer to these other standards as places to go and look for them. Because the fact that there are international standardization bodies like the ISO tackling these already would be a good reason to send people that direction as a way to kind of go, this is not what we cover.
Yeah, I think it would be worth at some point creating a kind of clear definition of scope. I mean, we've got a sense of ISCET scope now. It's not a professional, well, it kind of is a professional body, but it's not an accreditation body. It's not, having that more clearly defined in general would be a good thing to do. And as you say, Fiona, you can say what we are not. We are not this. We are not that. We are not here to do this. And the document that you drafted, Rasha, might be a good place to set some of that out.
I do remember that I have had it clearly mentioned, at least in some draft. I think it should be also in the final one now, that we're sharing that we're not a regulatory body. Maybe I'm gonna double check it, but I mean that's what I meant, that while I was drafting this, I was aware about like I took in all the notes, that we are just making sure that we follow what we all follow as clinicians from whatever existing guidelines, but we're not regulating. I mean, that was my concept trying to do this, and I hope like, so that's why, but of course, like that's why we share it together, that if something that needs to be more highlighted, of course we're going to do that. But I mean, that was clear while I was drafting that, but at the same time we had to have like some, I don't know, code of conduct
Yeah,
or
I
whatever
think
it's
that's a
called.
really helpful thing to have done. I appreciate the time you put into it.
Thank you. But yeah, so I will circulate again the Google. Maybe the Google Doc is easier to have comment, because the first thing that we wrote on the panel was that I'm gonna that this is the link for the Google Doc, but then please keep all the comments on the panel, the panel on ISCET's website. So are we now agreeing to do the reverse?
The comment, well, you can make, I mean, can you see the comments I made on the document? Because nobody's responding on the forum, and I think we may be leaning towards sort of decommissioning the forum, perhaps, so in favor of the email list. So I would suggest people make the comments on the Google document. But are you able to see my comments, or are they not?
Yeah. Let me double
People
check
could do the
it.
same. I mean, we've discussed that Google Docs is perhaps not the best place, certainly when it comes to standards development, because of they're not always attributed to individuals, any comments. So, there are other systems like Fiona's been using Overleaf, for example, which is maybe a better
Yeah,
thing in the future. But I think for this,
that's
just giving
why.
general feedback, people who use Google, they know how it works.
Yeah, that was the point of using the forum, that we have agreed on, just like moving from Google Docs. But like, I mean, would it be would it make sense to email everyone with this topic on the forum, because it's the same click? I mean,
Yeah, you could say, come to see the forum, leave your comments on the forum.
yeah,
If we're not happy using Google Docs and we are going to move from that, which I think we have discussed before, is potentially we're going to move away from, then maybe put it into Overleaf. I mean, Overleaf is quite intuitive to use. People may not be familiar with it, having not used it before, but it is pretty straightforward. You just type your words. I don't know, but actually, Fiona, can you comment on Overleaf in the same kind of way? Can you append comments?
yeah.
Yeah, you can comment in either the text side or on the PDF, as far as I remember. But for example, Larry was not familiar with Overleaf when I wrote the literature review for the nystagmus.
Yeah.
And when I wrote the other literature review for the questionnaire, I put it on Google Docs, but it gets very messy because people leave comments, and unless they've signed into Google, you don't know who it is. And there's also no record of who wrote what, which usually for standardization work is really important, so that you can demonstrate genuine consensus.
Definitely.
Um,
So
so
the issue though with Overleaf, as you said, is that people are unfamiliar with it and then don't engage necessarily. So
Well, I
you know,
think that when they see the code version, if they're not particularly technical, that might be a little intimidating. But now with Overleaf, you don't need to install LaTeX locally or anything. And you always have the PDF view as well as the code view. So they've done quite some work to make LaTeX accessible to people who don't want to look at the raw code. And you can change the interface so that it really appears more like a Word interface.
I'm wondering if there's a third option, which would be is there any way on Google of saying you're only allowed to actually edit the document if you're signed in? Is that a setting that they allow? Because that's the problem we've got with Google is the lack of attributability.
There isn't. And even if there were, another problem with Google is just version control and attribution. There's no blame function in Google, so you don't know who's written what,
Okay.
even if they are signed in.
So should we try putting this on Overleaf in the absence of any sort of other system that does provide that?
It's definitely a lot safer than Google Docs.
We can see how it goes. We can, if we provide a brief kind of guide to how presumably you just create an overleaf account and then you're in. See how that goes. Ruth, are you with us at the moment? I'd love to know how ISEV do it. As always, we sort of defer to ISEV, and I know that many ISEV standards are sort of created now, but when you're redrafting them, what's the process?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, so just our committees tend to be a lot smaller than these ones. So we work off Google Docs because everyone can sign in with a unique Gmail address, and then you can see who's edited and follow the trail, and you have got version control because every version is kept. It's not particularly, it's a bit clumsy, but that seems to work for our smaller committees. We don't have any better ideas than the ones you've already discussed.
Okay. There's no perfect solution then either. Google Docs might lose some attributability, whereas Overleaf might be over intimidating.
I think that we need, like combining all these thoughts, maybe we would, for now, share this as a Google Doc and tell people to make sure that they are signing in, at least in the first comment, make sure that, that you're signed in. And then because especially the membership, I think it was a pending task since like a lot of early last year. So I think just an exception, as you said, Matt, because not all people are yet into Overleaf. So also it would be good that we maybe later share the concept that we're moving all to Overleaf in subcommittees. Is that what I understood? As far as we can, but maybe we share together some tips for Overleaf, maybe on the panel.
I think either way, a kind of brief guide is necessary, right? If you're using Google, a brief guide to making sure you're signed in, and if Overleaf, then a brief guide on how to use it. I think maybe it requires that kind of instruction up front.
Yeah, but I think Overleaf. I'm not sure. Does Overleaf allow anonymous? I think I saw that one once, but I can't remember whether it was. I think it's on Google. I think Overleaf. Once you're signed in, you're signed in. I guess.
We're trying to avoid anonymous in this case.
I'm not sure.
And just to mention that I am just followed the link that Matt posted, and I don't see any comments from anybody, and I also don't have editing access to comment.
Interesting.
Okay. I think not having comments from anybody. I think many of our previous discussions on the panel has the same problem. I think people are not that active on such discussions, so I agree.
But this is on the Google Docs. You're not, because I can only see my comments, and maybe
I can't see your comments, Matt. Right, okay. So you did comment, and they're not visible.
Starting from page 2 on the type of engagement. There's my first comment.
Yeah, I don't. There's no comments at all on the whole document for me.
No, I see them. You're speaking about the Google Doc, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it's access request or something. Because I remember that the Google maybe this wasn't meant for everyone to comment on, as we said earlier. Like most of the comments it was explicitly mentioned that we comment on the panel, and that this only it was for reference. Like, but yeah, if we now agree on the reverse, I will make sure that everyone can have access to it.
And can I ask the panel? Can you just clarify what that is?
Well, on ISCET's website, we have. Okay. I'm sorry. I said I misused. I mean the forum. I'm sorry. That's what I went when I said the panel. Sorry, I meant the forum that it's on ISCET's website, the discussion forum.
Do you have a link for that, maybe?
Yeah.
I just posted the link to that specific post. So you can comment, I presume, you could leave things on the forum, but again, we start to scatter our points a little bit here. Yeah.
Okay. So I will open the comments, make sure it's open for everyone, and email this maybe email this in a way to everyone on the mailing list, and we'll ask everyone to try to, or actually to check that he's logged in with his account so that we know who comments what. And I will put a deadline, Helena, because because this has been actually this needs, yeah, we need to put this in action, and also we need to get comments because it's a good thing to have everyone brainstorming. So yeah, I think we can move to the is this the yeah, to we're I don't know, we have not a lot of time. Do you want to say something, Matt, about the standard subcommittee formalization or
Oh, we wanted, I think that was a point you added, was it, about how we would formalize the requirements for standard subcommittees? So I can talk about what we have at the moment,
yeah.
which I believe is that we've simply said that anybody with an interest can be involved in a subcommittee, pending any potential conflicts of interest must be taken into account with any decisions that they're involved in. And then the only other requirement that we've set so far was that a clinician should always be the chair of one of those standard committees or guideline committees, as they are in their first instance. That's the current setup. I don't personally see a problem with that unless they had somebody joining who had no interest in eye tracking, but then why would they? I don't know. What do you think?
I think you were asking everyone, right?
I know I
Or
was asking because Rasha, was it your point that you added to
yeah,
the?
yeah, me.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
because
do you want to introduce the item? Because I wasn't sure what you wanted to. Was it just to formalize what we've already kind of put, just to write it down, or did you want to change that?
I think that's very good for now. And after having formal memberships, there was a statement that maybe later on for certain subcommittee that we will have some like eligibility for joining that would benefit this subcommittee later on as things evolve. But I think what we are up to now is good enough.
I did have one point actually, which has come out from the what we've been doing so far in the fixation work, the fixation guideline, which is that I think it is actually probably worth making sure that on that committee we have an expert in the physiological eye movement basis of whatever it is we're testing. So, for example, fixational eye movements. To my knowledge, we don't have specific expertise on non-clinical fixational eye movements. Or when we move on to, for example, pursuit testing, it's all very well having clinicians who are interested in abnormal pursuit, but I think it would be worth having somebody on that committee who's kind of a world leading expert on physiological pursuit and saccades and so on. We also did mention previously that having data quality experts like Fiona, for example, on these panels is really helpful because, again, we need to know what the limitations are, and inviting manufacturers so far as they're interested to join is also valuable. Does that all sound reasonable to everyone as a kind of a broad structure? It doesn't exclude anybody, but it sort of sets criteria for who should at least be within that committee. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so
I'll make a point to write it down on the website then.
Simon, you wanna comment on something?
Oh no. I just think that's good.
Okay.
That's good for the committee, subcommittee.
Okay, I'll make it written explicitly on the website then. Should we move on then to
Yes.
to the evidence of impact? So, one of the things I wanted to talk about was how we kind of can track the impact that ISCET actually has in terms of how these standards are adopted and so on when they are available. Does anybody have any thoughts? Again, ISEV's input would be potentially useful here in terms of how you check that people are actually adopting or where the standards. One way we have to do this, of course, is to take a repeat survey of the current survey we're looking at in the future. Any other ideas around that?
Can I just add, from our perspective, it's a really hard thing to for how this is done. There's no regulatory authority that sits with ISF or with ISCET that it can do anything along those lines. So it's very much an offering. Here's what's here. The fact that it's done by consensus of the people who are most active in the field will by default mean it is followed by those that are interested in doing it. And that's about the best that you can do.
Okay, I'll move on to the next point then. Is that all right, Rasha? See your chair here. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's pretty good.
So the next thing I wanted to do was just briefly present some work where I've been wandering around. Where is it? There we go. So over the last 6 months, I've been touring around most of the eye tracking facilities in the UK, or at least in England and Wales. I appreciate, Ruth, we never got up as far as you, but the ones with the exclusion of the vestibular neurologist, because vestibular neurology is probably the case where eye tracking is most deeply embedded at the moment. I did go to a couple of centres for excellence for that, just to get a sense of what things are currently, how it's used currently, at least in the UK, and what the perceived barriers are. So there's a bit of overlap here with the survey. Now I presented this to the Nystagmus network, so I'll jump on from that, just what eye trackers are. As I said, main established use case is currently vestibular neurology. This should be about 7 slides, by the way. And it's used typically, when measuring head manipulation. So this is the VHIT test. And then there are orthoptics and ophthalmology clinics currently using them clinically, typically those that are involved in the detection and diagnosis of nystagmus. So I made visits to these centres in the UK. These are all non-vestibular neurology type centres, but then also these two in London that are kind of high tertiary centres for vestibular neurology. So what we found, and we've just literally just submitted this today to the Lancet Digital Health for review. So it's used in the fields of ophthalmology, neurology, and orthoptics. We know that there is potential use of eye tracking in psychiatry, but at the moment we've not been able to find any examples of it actually being used in a clinical sense in psychiatry. And I think this is one of those things that would maybe come down the line when.
Can I make a quick point? Are you excluding anti-saccade task, for example, in the measurement of ADHD there? Because that would be quite standard.
So I wasn't able to find anyone doing that at the moment, not at least in a clinical setting. I'm aware that these tests exist. I mean, I think I spoke to you actually at the time about, because you suggested sleep clinics, for example. And again, I wasn't able to find specific examples that were doing that at the moment, not routinely. It may be that we've missed stuff here, but this is what we tried to do. Are you aware of ADHD being routinely used, with eye tracking, anti-saccade testing in a clinical setting? Because it'd be great to add that in if we do know.
Is this to me?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, it would be probably the most robust test of ADHD.
Right.
So I don't know if that is considered psychiatry or neuropsychology, probably more neuropsychology.
I mean, maybe there may well be these gaps, from at least, so we, there was 14 co-authors on this paper, and we were unaware of any psychiatry type uses. Whether ADHD falls into that, I don't know, but at least amongst us, and I wasn't aware of it, nor were the co-authors, but there may well be gaps in our knowledge here, so this is why it's good.
I'm not a psychiatrist, so the only thing what would stand out to me from a psychiatry perspective is more autism related. But I'm a neuropsychologist, so for me the anti-saccade and ADHD would be probably the most obvious.
Yeah, we've got autism on the list here as potential, looking face tracking of faces and so on is proven to be a potentially useful metric. And what we're finding is a lot of these measures are proven to work in clinical populations, proven to be potentially useful, but the actual uptake, the actual translation to the clinic is the problem. And that's partly what this was all about, was trying to work out what are the barriers, why are people not using it in clinic at the moment. So the tests used are the kind of standard tests you'd expect to see, fixation pursuit, saccades, whether that be pro or anti, optokinetic nystagmus, VOR, and the head impulse testing, which relates to that. In terms of analysis, we talked earlier on as well about quantitative versus qualitative analysis. Fiona, the document you shared, you were talking about how nystagmus is assessed. Most clinicians that I spoke to are not doing quantitative analysis, even though the survey actually suggested the other way around. Potentially, there's slightly more quantitative and qualitative. Most of these clinics are not integrating their eye tracking data into the patient record. They are essentially maybe taking a screenshot of whatever software they have, or maybe just describing it as text. So I only found 2 clinics out of those, I can't remember how it was, 9 or 10 or so, that we looked at that were actually integrating an eye tracking data file into the patient record. Some are using self-made software, bespoke software. Some are using proprietary tools. It was 9 clinics. So across the 9 clinics which I visited, there were 11 different eye trackers used. Particularly in the vestibular neurology centers, there was multiple eye trackers used for different purposes. So what are the main barriers? So this is kind of overlap with the survey here now. So I think the main reason that eye tracking is not used typically is because people aren't aware of the potential value of it. That seems to be the number one reason, and that kind of leads downstream to all the other problems. A lack of standardized protocols is another one, which is obviously what we're hoping to change here. A lack of training, which of course ISCET could potentially provide. And then at least within the UK, we have the NHS and a lack of funding, both through actually purchasing the equipment, but also actually just reclaiming an oculomotor test. There's a lot of inconsistency as to how you can do that. And some clinics, for example, have a block contract, so they can see patients and they get paid for being a complex sort of tertiary clinic. Whereas those that are doing it on a non-tertiary center are there's very poor coding of these tests. And to give one example, one of the clinics was saying that if they do an ERG and they combine it with, I think it was with basically if they do one test, they get paid a certain amount. If they do the ERG and an eye tracking task, they actually get paid less for doing an extra test because it gets bundled in a different way. It's just to do with
it was the VP and ERG, Matt.
Right, VP, that's it.
We did those separately. We got more, and if they were together, we got less.
Yeah, no, in reality,
which makes absolutely no sense.
That doesn't make sense. You end up being paid less because you're giving the patients a better deal.
Yeah.
So it was you, wasn't it, in Southampton? So, and of course, many devices are not certified for clinical use, and so many clinicians are not happy to use that, which is understandable. And at the moment, these eye trackers require significant programming expertise to set up, and that's related to this use of bespoke software. So hopefully when ISCET has set some guidelines that are more widely available, there'll be more plug and play type stuff out there. So this is kind of the issue here. We've got this perceived lack of diagnostic value, which leads to which is partly due to the fact that there's no agreed protocols. And once we have these protocols in place, then the diagnostic value will increase, right? Because people will know what the thresholds are for diagnosis. So this, I think, is where we come in as ISCET. So we basically, I think this is where, what should ISCET be doing? In my view, increasing awareness of what eye tracking can do. Providing standardized protocols, which we're doing, getting known measurement reproducibility across clinics, because it's all very well having standards, but if you don't know what, the same patient visiting different centers is going to give, how wildly different that's going to vary, you can't really begin to establish diagnostic thresholds. So that feeds into the generation of normative data sets, or reference data sets as they should be known. Which allows us to then work out what the threshold should be. We've talked already in ISCET of having a cross-platform eye tracking data format, so that we're not having the Tobii device producing a different data file to the iLink, to the Bulbicam, and so on. We really need these speaking the same language and with a common data format. And these devices need to be certified. Now, some are. The Bulbicam, for example, is already certified. And then ultimately, hopefully, ISCET can potentially help with training, although we've already ruled out being a kind of accreditation body, but at least providing some kind of teaching and training materials. Again, this is my view on this. Others may disagree. And then I think within the UK, at least, having unified NHS tariff so we can claim back. And I think that's the last one there. Yeah, having user-friendly, accessible eye tracking software. So again, the manufacturers will hopefully come to this naturally anyway over time.
Understanding of just in terms of his level of understanding of clinical eye tracking, any eye tracking, and his programming expertise, which is very unique, I would say. It's going to be a very robust and reliable method. It was a massive amount of work that he put into doing that. So I think it would be hard to replace.
So one of the I gave that outline of potential standards. One of the things we discussed before was having an ISCET standard for what the data format to be used across platforms should be. So even if that ends up just being a pointer saying just use this, it would maybe be worth getting Sol involved in that process of just reviewing, is this suitable for this application? And if so, then maybe we could just adopt that if it already exists and it has everything we need.
Yeah, the approach that we took was to try and basically take everything the eye trackers are offering as data. So you could have a layer over that in terms of what's most relevant for different clinical setups or different clinical intentions. But essentially it takes everything available. And there was quite some work in there also to get behind any kind of smoothing or infilling that might be done on the data, anything to get as close to the raw data as possible. So there was a lot of work done so that you could run even this exact same experimental script on any of the integrated eye trackers.
Are you in?
Pardon?
Are you in touch with Sol?
I have been, not in a while, but I do know him quite well.
Okay. So maybe when the current standard process has been concluded, the plan at the moment, at least, is to take what we've learned from that process and then start in parallel working on multiple standards. And so perhaps if Sol would be interested in being involved in that, he could have a leading role in the data format, which, as I say, might just be pointing to what is already out there, or it could just be a case of reviewing what is out there that he's helped to create and then see how that fits.
Sure. It was created within the Eye Data Quality Committee at that time. So there was a lot of input from many different eye tracking manufacturers in that project too. So they all helped integrate their trackers into the IO hub, as it's called. So it means that there's a huge chunk of work done that not very many software developers would be able to do well. At least not to the degree of expertise that Sol would have.
What was the last? Sol?
Simpson.
Okay, I'll look it up and I'll
Canada.
Okay, make a note.
I can reach out and ask if he has interest.
Might be good just to gauge interest at this stage because we wouldn't be quite jumping into that yet, but I think it would be one of the next steps following the fixation and nystagmus guideline because you can't apply any of this until we have the underpinning things like data format.
Yeah, and also the fact that you can run the same script on any eye tracker and have comparable recordings from them.
Great.
Great. So this is I think we have quite plenty of time to discuss the last. I felt like we were rushing, but and now we're going to discuss this more next time also, but having the normative data or like a I think it would be nice even that you have the last slide, Matt, because it almost said 3 points from what we are gonna discuss, or actually open the discussion for. Yeah, because I felt okay, that was so much into the same point, which is great.
My last slide should be really thanking
The pre-last.
we had a recording finish.
Yeah, so
and
yes, the reference normative data set.
reference data sets. Yeah, so
Yeah, exactly.
I thought it'd be good to start thinking about this early on, because let's say we have standards, let's say we have a common data format. Having some system by which clinicians can anonymously send data from their systems, would really help. The more the better, right? From varying setups, to know what the reproducibility limits are, what the diagnostic thresholds are, and so on. I don't. Again, Ruth will have to feed into this, I think, more because she's president of ISCET, and they obviously have they maintain reference data sets for ISCET standards. But going into this, with foresight, we may be able to actually set some kind of database up. That's going to involve a huge amount of bureaucracy in terms of data protection, anonymization, etc. But I don't think we should dismiss it outright, because it could really benefit patients to have this set up. So I really just thought it'd be good to have a very early discussion on how people feel that might work. But with Ruth not here, that might be harder, but there's obviously plenty of other people who can discuss it.
I guess it's just having everyone bear in mind what data they should be recording from the outset. Even if you don't have the database set up, what you don't want to have to do is then ask everyone for data they haven't collected, because that's a lot harder to sort out retrospectively than actually doing it from the very beginning. So even if we don't have somewhere to put it, if everyone agrees to say, we must always have age, an obvious one, sex, race, ethnicity, all the things that might affect, pigmentation of the eye, will that affect it?
So this was one of the things I'd suggest another subcommittee. So this would be dealt by a group of people. It's probably going to be the most challenging of all the subcommittees, I should imagine, just because of complexity to it. But yeah, you're right, collecting that data. And if we're setting a guideline or even standards for how eye trackers should collect this data, then if they had this built in as a standard, not that they automatically send the data off, although that is one option. If it's anonymized and there is some way of getting that, like computers send off the anonymous usage statistics, that sort of thing, something that is completely protects the identity of the patient, but would have to somehow include the diagnostic label, because without that, you're not informing anything really, are you? Anyway, lots to think about, and I just want to invite early discussion.
Yeah, but do you think because that's a good idea to make a call for such a subcommittee from now, or what do you think?
I think it might be premature to do that. I think starting to think about people who might sit on these committees, like Sol, for example, for a data format committee. I think it's good to start thinking about. But until the fixation and nystagmus standards are ready to go, or at least nearly out, I think we should be holding back on trying to kind of organize committees, because we don't know how long it's going to take, and we might learn from the process of how, by the time we get to the end of the first ones, for example, how we even recruit people to the committees. We've only spoken today, right, about the composition of the committees. So, but I completely agree. We should be thinking about who are the right people, and if people know relevant people, then perhaps they could be involved in these pre-discussions by inviting them to join ISCET.
I think you would need to have large manufacturer buy-in to come up with any kind of standard data format. Bearing in mind that different manufacturers have different approaches to what they will actually allow you access. That's also something that came up in discussion with Larry, that, as more and more automated plug and play type systems are available, for example, for VHIT, access to raw data becomes actually more important for validation. And you can't get very far towards a standard format or standard reporting unless you have the manufacturer buy-in. So I would suggest that when you have some guidelines published, that gives manufacturers a reason to want to buy in, whereas before that it could be a hard sell, because very often manufacturers have reasons they don't want to provide complete access to raw data. And that may be because, for example, some eye trackers now are using machine learning methods or AI techniques to fill in missing data and so on, with a pretty much unknown effect in many cases. So I think it makes sense to try and give them a reason to want to buy in first, and that would be seeing published guidelines from the clinical community. If if their market ambitions include clinical use.
Absolutely. If there's a clear clinical market, then that clinical market wants to use ISCET approved protocols, then they'll need to demonstrate that they can provide those protocols. And if our protocols include you've got to give us access to the data in a format that's common and doesn't, fiddle with the data in any way, they'll have to comply if they want to be part of that market.
Yeah. And you're also looking at if there's to be guidelines on things like what is the minimal sample rate for a certain measure and so on, that are based on the physics and the physiology, then, just from previous experience with the data quality, there can be quite some sensitivities and quite some careful negotiation to do to get the manufacturers on board. Also because you may be making a statement that excludes their system from certain kinds of measures.
I just take an opportunity to another plea. If anybody knows of any contacts, either industry or just expertise from an academic sense, then I'm going to post again in the chat here the link to sign up to the JIS email list. Fiona, then you can use the same one here. You just go in there and click subscribe. Please invite people to get involved so they can be part of these discussions early on and then potentially contribute down the line.
Yeah, great. So do we have more things to discuss today? Anyone wants to jump in and say something about whatever we discussed today, or maybe other thoughts? Feel welcome to do that, please. Okay, then. So are we happy to end this meeting? Okay, great. Great job today. I was so worried from the amount of the agenda was really long, but that was really very good discussions out there. So we'll see hopefully how much of the recordings, and I do apologize, I don't know what happened today at my side, but we will be definitely publishing the minutes of the meeting and what we have of the recording and everything on our website as usual, and the YouTube. Okay. So see you next meeting then, everyone. It hasn't been decided yet, but we will, I think we'll try to be using the email list until also the mailing list that we have. And we also invite you to check the forum from time to time, but we will make sure that we email you with the next meeting when it's set up.
The next meeting will be the American group.
Yes. Yes. If anyone from here can join, of course. Okay, see you next time.
Bye-bye.